All right, folks. Week 8 got started last night with the Vikings at the Rams. A very strange ending to that game with an obvious missed face mask on the Vikings in the end zone to win the game, or end the game, excuse me. But I think there was a very small chance, or almost no chance, the Vikings would have went 85 yards, gotten the 2-point conversion, and then won in overtime. But it would have been really fun to see them try. So really a strange start to the week, but an enormous week coming up. There are several games between first-place teams. There are a couple must-win games, and some games that are really important for some teams. And there are 4 games I'm looking at, starting with the Cowboys at the Niners. I think both of these teams desperately need to win this game. If you look at the Niners right now, a team that I thought was the best team going in the NFC, they're currently sitting at last place in the NFC West, and they cannot afford to lose this game, especially with their schedule coming up. This is a little bit of a strange game. Both teams are kind of reeling. If you look at the Cowboys, Micah Parsons, the best player on their team, is still out. Teams are running all over them. And then on the Niners side, they've all of a sudden become very thin at the wide receiver position with Brandon Ayuk going out. It does look like Deebo Samuel is a full go, and he will play, but this will be an interesting game, and 2 teams that desperately need this game, so that'll be fun. Number 2, the Falcons at the Bucs. This game is for first place. Both teams sitting at 4-3. And I think whoever wins this game could decide the division. The Bucs had a terrible loss on Monday night versus the Ravens, not necessarily because they lost the game, but they lost their 2 best wide receivers, Godwin and Evans, in that game. And they went from one of the best wide receiving corps to one of the worst in a matter of a couple minutes, and that's a tough loss. And we'll see how Baker can do. Baker's been awesome this season, but we'll see how he can do without his top 2 weapons here this weekend. Bills at Seahawks. I think this is a very important game for both teams. Both are in first place right now. Bills traveling across the country to play at the Seattle Seahawks. And 2.5 of the Josh Allen's last 3 games, I feel like he really struggled. And if you look at that Titans game last week, they blew him out, but it was really close there in the first half. Seahawks coming off their best win of the season when they absolutely housed the Falcons last week. So I think this will be a really interesting matchup, and this could be an enormous season-changing win if the Seahawks are able to pull this off at home. And then number 4, the Eagles versus Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals are still in a spot where they need this win. Eagles are in second place right now in the NFC North, but it's a close race there in the NFC East, excuse me. But you're looking at a team in the Bengals who have one of the best offenses in the league going against a very porous defense with the Eagles and really struggle at cornerback versus 2 of the best wide receivers and probably the best 1-2 combination in the NFL. So coming off a winning week, let's get to my picks. So number 1, I'm going to take the Falcons minus 2.5 at Tampa Bay. And this really comes down to Tampa Bay's injuries. You know, losing Godwin and Evans, that's an enormous loss. Falcons coming off a pretty poor showing, one of Kirk Cousins' worst games in the last few years. I think they bounce back, and I think they're going to handle the Bucs in Tampa Bay. I just don't see how they're going to be able to move the ball without those 2 wide receivers. They're just so important to that team, and I'm going to take the Falcons minus 2.5 at Tampa. Number 2, I'm going to very reluctantly take the Cowboys plus 4.5 in San Francisco. I do not feel great about this one. But the 49ers are reeling. The Cowboys desperately need this game. They're going to be without Micah Parsons, but there's no Brandon Ayuk or Christian McCaffrey on the opposite side. I think the 49ers will ultimately win this game, but I think it's going to be very tight, and I'm going to take the Cowboys and the points. Number 3, I'm going to take the Seahawks plus 3.5 versus the Bills. And this is in Seattle, long trip across country. Seattle's coming off one of their best wins. Josh Allen's last 3 games have been pretty average. I know there's a huge addition with Cooper at wide receiver, but I'm going to take the Seahawks plus 3.5 at home versus the Bills. Number 4, I'm going to take the Bengals minus 2.5 at home versus the Eagles. And it basically comes down to 2 great wide receivers going against a very poor secondary in the Eagles. The Bengals, one of the best offenses in the league, going against a terrible offense. I think they are going to put up a ton of points. And I have really hated the Eagles coaching this year. They have not seemed until this last game against the Giants to figure out that Saquon Barkley is your best player, and he needs to be touching the ball a lot more than he is. And until they change that, I'm not going to have a lot of faith in this team. And I hate that Eagles defense right now. I love the Bengals offense, and I think the Bengals are going to cover the 2.5. And number 5, I'm going to take the Colts +6 at Houston. This comes down to a couple things. For number one, I think 6 is way too big of a number. They played already once this year. It was pretty close. And C.J. Stroud has been a little underwhelming. And without Nico Collins, they have really struggled to move the ball. I noticed last week, 84 yards passing for the Texans. Without Nico, it's really tough sledding for them on offense. I would feel better about this if Joe Flacco was starting at quarterback opposed to Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson just struggles so much to hit the easy ones, the layups, but I am going to take the Colts to cover the 6. I think the Texans will win in a very close game. So that's who I have. I'll talk to everyone Sunday night.